Between the year 1900 and 1964, over 800 people were hanged in the UK. But some of these long-standing convictions could have been a miscarriage of justice.
They've got no evidence. They're just trying to haul anybody in for it.
Barristers Sasha Wass and Jeremy Dean have been investigating these life-changing cases as they teamed up with living relatives, desperate to clear their family name.
I feel very bitter. She was just a scapegoat.
Together, they investigated the convictions.
Did the prosecution get it fundamentally wrong from the outset?
The marriage was a very troubled one, so as far as motive is concerned, she had every reason to be rid of him.
And reassess the evidence using modern forensic techniques.
You can see an absolutely clear border. It is here.
Before they submitted their findings to a Crown Court judge, who determined whether the conviction was safe or a miscarriage of justice.
I'm here today to consider, with the help of learned counsel, the safety of the conviction.
Now, as we reunite the barristers and the family members for the first time, we'll be finding out exactly what happened next.
It's taken nearly 96 years since her tragic death to get her back with her parents. But here she is with them today.
Was justice finally served? And are the unexplained cases finally closed? In the mid-19th century, a poison panic gripped Victorian Britain when a slew of murders, many perpetrated by women, caused national hysteria. Their weapon of choice was an easily available powdered poison: arsenic. Today, Jeremy and Sasha are revisiting a series of suspicious deaths that took place in the small village of Clavering, Essex, in the 1850s. A local woman was hanged for them. Her name, Sarah Chesham.
So, Jeremy, we both agreed in this case that Sarah Chesham was a victim of a miscarriage of justice. In this era, she was not allowed to give evidence on her own behalf. She was deprived of legal representation and effectively took no part in her trial whatsoever.
And of course, in the background of all that, Professor Athol Johnson told us that the toxicology evidence was unsafe and that there were real grounds for concern.
And of course, the background to this case was steeped in local gossip. And you'll remember that Sarah Chesham was known as Sally Arsenic, something that the jury was told about.
Well, of course, that could explain how an original cause of death finding, one of TB, was converted into a conviction for murder.
Exactly.
Later, Jeremy and Sasha will be meeting up with family relatives to find out exactly what happened next. But first, a look at this intriguing case. In May 1850, in the small village of Clavering, Essex, 43-year-old farm labourer Richard Chesham died after a long illness. The doctor attributed his death to tuberculosis. Rumour was rife, however, that his wife, 42-year-old Sarah Chesham, was somehow responsible for his death. Sarah had gained a reputation as a serial poisoner 3 years earlier, when she was accused of killing 3 local boys using poison. She was acquitted on all charges, but the shadow of these grisly events hung over her. Although Richard had died of natural causes, an inquest revealed traces of arsenic, and Sarah was charged, not with murder, but curiously, with administering poison with intent to murder. At trial, Sarah had no lawyer, and she was swiftly found guilty. On the 25th of March 1851, at a public execution at Springfield Jail in Chelmsford, Sarah Chesham became the last woman ever hanged for attempted murder. Now, more than 160 years and 4 generations later, Sarah's cousin Ros Powell has become engrossed in her ancestor's sensational story. Ros began researching her family tree several years ago with her husband Stephen and discovered the shocking secret in her family's past.
My cousin said to me, I found a murderess in our family, and I thought, this sounds rather intriguing. And he said, oh, she was a poisoner. You know, it was arsenic. She was hung. And then we started to do the research. It doesn't seem true. It was just a lot of hearsay, a lot of nasty gossip. 25th of March 1851, Sarah is executed, hanged in public at Chelmsford Jail. I take it quite personal because I thought Sarah is a cousin of mine and I felt she was wronged. I don't think she committed the crimes and I just want to clear her name, and if we can do that, it would be absolutely fantastic.
Criminal defence barrister Jeremy Dean will bring over 35 years of experience to this historic case. Examining this case for the prosecution is Sasha Was, who has a particular interest in cases based on medical or scientific evidence. But first, they want to meet Ros and Steve to get their take on the case.
Sasha, hello there. Do sit down.
Well, thank you very much for coming. Why is it so important to you to do your best to clear Sarah Chesham's name?
Well, I suppose because women of that era, they couldn't maybe speak up for themselves. And hopefully I can speak up for Sarah and prove her not guilty.
Just suppose for a moment something came to light which you weren't up until now aware of, which really indicates that Sarah was guilty.
You feel you'll be able to accept that?
I would
state of
have to
affairs?
accept it because I feel that at least I've tried to clear her name.
Richard Chesham died on the 16th of May 1850. The cause of death was recorded as tubercular consumption, but further investigation revealed Richard had what's described as 1/25th of a grain of arsenic in his stomach. It was suggested he had been poisoned, and his wife was charged with attempted murder.
So, Jeremy, this case concerns Sarah Chesham, who was accused of administering poison to her husband, Richard Chesham. The police immediately treated her home as a crime scene, and quite significant portions of arsenic were found in the rice. But nonetheless, Sarah was charged with attempting to administer poison with intent to commit murder. She was found guilty by the jury and she was hanged for this offence.
Well, Sasha, this corner of England was swept up with a sort of poison panic at the time. My concern is that Sarah Chesham was a victim of that sort of phobia.
During Victorian Britain's poison panic, 167 people were charged with murder or attempted murder by poisoning between 1840 and 1850. Sarah Chesham's sensational story saw her tried 4 times for poisoning. She was labelled a wicked woman in the press and nicknamed Sally Arsenic. Sarah Chesham lived in the tiny village of Clavering in Essex, home to just over 1,000 inhabitants. Ros and Stephen have arrived at the house, known as Pons Manor, where the Chesham family once lived.
Oh, my word. Look at it. I can imagine her in my mind's eye saying, I'm glad you've come here, welcome.
I think it's fantastic. You can feel some sort of spiritual sense of...
something. I can feel, I don't know what it is, but it's like coming home. I feel honoured that I've been able to come here. You know, it's like a pilgrimage, isn't it, to her memory. It's lovely to see it. I feel quite emotional, actually.
The barristers are beginning their investigation into the conviction of Sarah Chesham for the attempted murder of her husband Richard by examining her history.
We need to turn the clock back to look at the death of Sarah Chesham's own children in 1845.
Jeremy, you're absolutely right, because, of course, in January 1845, Joseph and James Chesham died within days of each other, and the cause of death given by the doctor was cholera.
So nothing suspicious
Nothing suspicious there.
In January 1845, 10-year-old Joseph and 8-year-old James Chesham fell ill and died. The cause of death at the time was recorded as cholera, but their bodies were later exhumed and arsenic was discovered. As a result, Sarah Chesham was charged with their murders. Historian Helen Burrell has come to the home of Roz's ancestors to explain how the death of the Chesham boys triggered a series of events that ultimately led to the hanging of Sarah Chesham.
I just can't imagine how it happened or why.
It almost seems as if perhaps arsenic had got into the family food by accident, and so that the 4 boys were suffering from effects of it, but it was Joseph and James who perhaps ingested the biggest amount.
The investigation into the deaths of the Chesham boys was prompted after local woman Lydia Taylor accused Sarah of trying to poison her infant son, Solomon. Helen has brought Roz and Stephen to the farm where Lydia Taylor once worked. It was owned by Thomas Newport, an important landowner who employed not only Lydia Taylor, but also Richard and Joseph Chesham.
Lydia Taylor started working here age 17, hired by Thomas's mum, and he propositioned her within 2 weeks of her starting work.
Yes.
And she said no. And eventually a roll in the hay happened and she ended up pregnant.
And she was only 17 when she got pregnant by him.
Yeah.
So she decided to take it upon herself to take him to magistrates to get child support.
Absolutely.
But of course, this is where it all stemmed from, with accusations of Sarah poisoning Solomon.
The barristers are looking into the chain of events that saw Sarah Chesham facing 3 simultaneous inquests, accused of poisoning Solomon Taylor and of murdering her own sons Joseph and James using arsenic.
It seems that after the death of Joseph and James and after the birth of Solomon Taylor, it was at that stage that Sarah Chesham befriended Lydia Taylor.
Lydia told the magistrates' court that on each occasion that Sarah visited, Sarah fed the baby something and he became ill, suffering convulsions.
So in August 1846, Sarah appeared before the magistrates' court on a charge of attempted poisoning in relation to Solomon, and it was at that stage that it came to light that her own 2 children, Joseph and James, had died unexpectedly a year before.
And as a consequence of that, the bodies of James and Joseph were exhumed. Alfred Swain Taylor, Professor of Chemistry and Medical Jurisprudence at Guy's Hospital, gave evidence that he'd examined the stomach of each of the 2 Chesham boys and that both contained arsenic. He said, "I should infer beyond all question that death was caused by poison." Sasha, it's noteworthy, based on the chronology, that if Sarah Chesham poisoned her 2 sons, that went completely unnoticed until Lydia Taylor made the accusation that Sarah Chesham had poisoned Solomon Taylor. I mean, that's an unusual scenario and obviously an important context in which the attempted poisoning of Richard Chesham has to be considered.
I agree. It's an entire narrative which has to be looked at in detail.
So were the Chesham boys deliberately poisoned? Helen has brought Roz and Stephen to the pub where the inquest into their deaths was held, the Fox and Hounds Inn in Clavering.
In those days, inquests used to take place in pubs because you're in a village, there isn't a police court or anywhere that's particularly nearby, and it means that it's kind of open to the public as well, so anybody could come in and witness it taking place.
What was the actual specific role of the inquests at the time?
It's essentially a way of investigating things, and you've got one witness after another coming in. Inquests could be quite rowdy, and I think it was Sarah who shouted across the room, "You lie, neighbour," like this, across the room.
You can just imagine her saying that because she is fighting for her life.
It does have a jury. The problem was that they'd have to make sure that they were impartial, and to be honest, that's impossible. In a very small community, everyone knows each other.
The verdict was that the boys were willfully murdered and that their mother, Sarah Chesham, was responsible. She was detained in Springfield Jail to await trial for their murders.
Then in September 1846, on the 27th, Solomon Taylor died. The bottom line here, Sasha, is that the medical evidence surrounding Solomon's death did not support the assertion that Sarah Chesham had poisoned him. It does appear that there is a pattern of Sarah Chesham being treated as if she was a poisoner, whatever the evidence turned out to be. And that obviously is a matter of particular concern.
Well, the point you're making is that mud sticks, that she'd been accused of poisoning a baby. She was acquitted. The baby hadn't been poisoned. She was accused of poisoning her sons. She was then acquitted of that. So by the time we come to Richard's trial, if I can call it that, her reputation locally must have been in tatters.
The 3 trials of Sarah Chesham took place over 2 days in March 1847 at the Essex Assizes, where Sarah had the benefit of an excellent defence lawyer. While James and Joseph were both shown to have ingested arsenic, Sarah Chesham could not be connected with the possession of arsenic, and the jury found her not guilty. Once the medical evidence was heard in relation to Solomon Taylor's death, that trial was halted, and the judge acquitted Sarah Chesham. She returned to life in Clavering, but when her husband died 3 years later, her unproven reputation as a poisoner seemed to overshadow the circumstances of his death, and she would go on to face a charge of attempted murder without representation at trial.
An inquest was opened and Alfred Swain Taylor testified to finding arsenic remains in Richard's body.
Sarah Chesham was tried by judge and jury on 3 separate occasions for 3 episodes of alleged poisoning, and on each occasion she was found not guilty. It's difficult to understand in those circumstances how she found herself on trial for the killing of Richard Chesham.
2 of Sarah Chesham's sons and her husband Richard were said to have been poisoned with arsenic, but how reliable was forensic testing in 1850? The barristers have asked Professor Andrea Sella to explain the tests that would have been available to experts at the time.
One is called the Reinsch test. And what I have here is a little solution which contains quite a lot of arsenic. We can see the difference between a control and then the real thing.
Right.
Now we have to acidify it, and I'm going to add hydrochloric acid to both sides. We'll take 2 pieces of copper and we'll put it into our control solution. And then the second one, we're actually going to put into our arsenic solution. So this is a purely qualitative test. It's a test which will simply say, it is here.
Right.
I think what we need to do is to take a look. Right? You can see an absolutely clear border, but it's not completely conclusive for arsenic.
You mentioned that there was another test available in the era that we're asking you about.
An English chemist called James Marsh came up with a really revolutionary test. You could add zinc and a bit of acid, and when you add acid to zinc, what you get is hydrogen. Out comes the arsine gas. And so the trick was to light the flame at the end. And if you got a black silvery mirror spot which appeared on there, you knew that you had arsenic present. The real problem was, what was the quality of the starting materials you used? Particularly sulfuric acid was very variable in quality. It was sometimes itself contaminated with arsenic. And so that was one of the reasons why the Marsh test actually had a little bit of uncertainty to it. If you use the wrong acid, it might give you a false positive.
On the 6th of March 1851, Sarah Chesham again stood in the dock at Chelmsford Shire Hall. Despite the seriousness of the charge, she was not provided with a barrister, and the illiterate, impoverished woman was forced to defend herself.
Perhaps the most damning evidence in the case was the evidence of somebody described as a friend and neighbour, Hannah Phillips. Hannah Phillips said that she had had conversations with Sarah Chesham, and Sarah Chesham had offered to poison her husband by seasoning mince pies. And Hannah Phillips said that Sarah Chesham's nickname was Sally Arsenic. So the suggestion is really from Hannah Phillips that Sarah Chesham was a professional poisoner. All of this should have been challenged, no doubt could have been challenged, but was not challenged because of the lack of legal representation.
To further understand the toxicological evidence that led to Sarah Chesham's conviction, the barristers have asked Athol Johnston Professor of Clinical Pharmacology at Queen Mary's University, London, to review the findings of Alfred Swain Taylor.
The prosecution put the case was that there was a very small amount of arsenic found in Richard Chesham's system.
Well, he may well have had arsenic in his body, but, you know, one of the things at this stage was not appreciated was that there is a normal level of arsenic in the body.
We know that Sarah Chesham was not legally represented at her trial. Would you agree that anybody tried is liable to be substantially prejudiced by the unavailability of a defence expert?
I think you're on a hiding to nothing if you're up against Swain Taylor in 1850 and you've got no defence barrister and his ability to convince juries was well known.
And you're saying, of course, that in your opinion, from what you've seen, significant aspects of his opinion might have been in error.
Well, his evidence just was not challenged. There was no one there to challenge his evidence. There's no one there to really unpick it and see whether it was reliable or not.
Which is a recipe for injustice.
Yes, it is.
Athol Johnson's contribution is really important. She was left to fight her own case. There was no one to cross-examine Swain Taylor. He was held in high regard. In my view, that undermines Sarah Chesham's conviction for sure.
Ros and Stephen have come to Chelmsford Prison in Essex, where Sarah Chesham was hanged on the 25th of March, 1851.
I can just imagine her up there, sort of like with a noose round her neck, right up until the end. She says, "I am not guilty."
Yeah, it's a sad occasion.
Sad. I feel really angry about it. You know, I'm filling up again. It is so sad and it should never have happened. And if I can clear her name, I'll do my damnedest to do it.
As the barristers reach the final stages of their investigation, Jeremy has made a discovery within a report commissioned for the Solicitor General.
Sasha, this is an absolutely extraordinary letter. It was written by a barrister called H. Hawkins after the inquest. And what it sets out to do, without any shadow of a doubt, is to build a case against Sarah Chesham, even though it acknowledges that there is no evidence. Mr. Hawkins says as follows: morally speaking, there can be little doubt of arsenic having been the cause of these intermittent attacks of illness, and concludes by asking for clarification of whether the Solicitor and Attorney General feel that there is sufficient evidence to apprehend Sarah Chesham, and in short, to have her prosecuted and convicted for murder.
It's clear from what is being suggested in this document, it is almost a blueprint for creating evidence against a woman in respect of whom there is no evidence.
After the execution, Sarah's eldest son, Philip, was permitted to bring his mother's body home to Clavering. She was buried without ceremony in the same graveyard as her husband and sons that she'd been accused of murdering.
It's been a very emotional journey. We just hope that people may see her in a different light, and you just feel like saying, "Sarah, we've done it for you, and let you now rest in peace."
After more than 160 years, a new day of judgment for Sarah Chesham has arrived.
She was convicted of murder and hanged, but she had no legal representation. That's an astonishing thought.
The Chesham case dates back to 1850 and very few records remain. However, everything I have seen has caused me real concern, and I will be saying as much to the judge.
For Ros and Stephen, today might bring closure on a family mystery that they've researched for almost a decade.
How are you feeling about the judgment today?
I am feeling a tad nervous,
Okay.
but I'm excited because I want to know what's going to happen.
Right.
His Honour Judge David Radford was a full-time judge for over 20 years, sitting at the Crown Court, the Circuit Court, and over criminal cases at the Court of Appeal.
We are here today for me to consider, with the assistance of the Learned Counsel, the safety of the conviction of Sarah Chesham in 1850 on a charge of administering poison to her husband with intent to murder him. Mr. Dean.
Your Honour, at no point in time did Miss Chesham have available to her legal representation. So when it came to the pivotal issue being whether the 1/25th of a grain of arsenic was truly arsenic, truly administered by Sarah Chesham, there was no lawyer to represent Sarah Chesham, which is an unthinkable state of affairs. And in the course of this inquiry, we have had the benefit of hearing from Professor Athol Johnson, who is a clinical pharmacologist. He said that Richard Chesham may well have had a trace of arsenic in his system, but the body could have a normal level of arsenic, and at that time that might well not have been appreciated. He said that Alfred Swain Taylor was a famous expert in his day, the kind of expert that would simply go into court and be believed. And frankly, Professor Johnson was stunned to learn there was no one of a qualified nature to cross-examine on these highly complex forensic issues. And it's my submission in those circumstances that the trial was nothing more than a show trial and that it was doomed to failure from the outset. I invite Your Honour to conclude that this conviction of Sarah Chesham's is unsafe.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Ms. Watts, do you wish to respond?
Having reviewed the evidence, will Sasha support Jeremy's submission that Sarah Chesham's conviction was unsafe?
Your Honour, at the time of Sarah Chesham's trial in 1850, she had already been acquitted of 3 charges arising out of allegations of arsenic poisoning. The main prosecution witness in the trial that Your Honour is looking at was a woman called Hannah Phillips, somebody who relied on the history and reputation of Sarah Chesham and in fact referred to the defendant as Sally Arsenic, thus allowing her bad character to go before a jury. But as Sarah Chesham had no lawyer, the jury never had the opportunity of seeing that evidence challenged. And it cannot possibly be said that she had a fair trial. And we wholly support the submissions made by Mr. Dean.
Yes, thank you. Well, I shall review the papers again in the light of those submissions.
Did the main prosecution witness mislead the jury? Was the expert evidence regarding arsenic reliable? And did Sarah Chesham receive a fair trial? Judge Radford is ready to give his verdict.
Whilst it has to be remembered that the trial of Sarah Chesham took place as long ago as 1850, when the state of the law relating to the conduct of criminal cases was not what it has to be today, it was still a requirement that a conviction obtained in an unfair and unsafe way would not stand the test of proper scrutiny. Additionally, there were grounds indeed to cross-examine the toxicologist Alfred Swain Taylor, given that Richard Chesham died of consumption and had only a scintilla of arsenic in his body. I fear that Sarah Chesham's last trial was affected by prejudice and unproven allegations of which she had been cleared of guilt. She had no fair trial, and that lack of fairness has exposed the unsafety of much of the evidence upon which she was convicted. In my opinion, this verdict cannot stand. It is unsafe. I therefore rise.
But after reviewing the facts of the case, will Jeremy and Sasha remain confident that the correct judgment was made?
Sasha, in my view, Judge Radford's decision in the case of Sarah Chesham was inevitable. There were so many arguments in favour of conviction being treated as unsafe, lack of representation, inability to give evidence, Athol Johnson's evidence. Judge Radford really had no choice but to decide in the way that he did, don't you think?
Well, I agree. I actually wonder if the case could have got off the ground at all by modern-day standards, and I suspect the answer is no.
Steve and Ros have travelled to London to meet the barristers. This is the first time they have met since the judgment.
It'll be lovely meeting with the barristers again so we can update them on what we've been up to. I think that they will be pleasantly surprised at how far we've managed to continue with Sarah and her case and the different avenues we've been exploring, especially the legal side.
Hello, Steve. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Ros, good to see you.
Ros, have a seat. Okay. Tell us both how you felt about the judgment. I mean, obviously it's what you hoped for.
Didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. You're just walking around with a smile on your face, as if to say, well, we've come so far, and what is the next step?
How did it make you feel knowing that Sarah Chesham had been executed for a crime which a judge in the modern era has said perhaps she didn't commit?
I feel very angry, very sad and very bitter at the way she was treated. She didn't have any representation at trial. She didn't have any chance to stand up for herself, voice her opinions. She was just a scapegoat.
So what have the two of you been up to since we last met?
Applying to Inside Justice, who deals with miscarriages of justice.
Isn't it very unusual for them to deal with historic cases?
Yes, it is.
It is, isn't it?
Yes.
New evidence would be required in order for the Criminal Cases Review Commission to look again at the safety of Sarah's conviction. Less than 1% of all cases presented to the CCRC result in a referral to the Court of Appeal. So Ros and Steve need all the help they can get. They've arranged to meet Louise Shorter, CEO of legal charity Inside Justice, which investigates modern miscarriages of justice.
You feel slight trepidation or, you know, what she's going to do or say, you know, and then I don't want it to be like a wasted journey or anything.
It's extremely rare for the charity to take on a case as old as Sarah Chesham's.
I feel a bit nervous, really.
Nervous with hope that she will be able to, you know, help us in a way where we can go back as far as 150 years. That it was definitely a miscarriage of justice.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Ros.
Hello, Ros. Louise, nice to see you.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve. Sit down. Have a seat.
Louise, when you actually heard about Sarah's case and her plight, what were your initial feelings?
Honestly, my initial reaction was we have too many people who are currently in prison, serving very long sentences, who may well die in prison unless they get their convictions quashed, that we're trying to help. To start trying to get involved with a case that's so old, I got one of our researchers to look at some of the papers and then to come back to me with a report. And from what I then saw in her report, I sat there reading it through and over again and again and thinking, well, what on earth actually convicted this woman? I will get more of the case papers sent over to me.
Yes.
We have an advisory panel meeting where all of our experts come together, medics and lawyers and DNA experts and all sorts. We have a retired judge sitting on our panel, so I will see if one of those people would be prepared to look at it to see whether or not a CCRC submission is likely to succeed. So I can't promise that they'll say yes, but I can.
But you know, promise to give it a go. It was just a witch hunt at the end of the day.
The poor woman was completely doomed, wasn't she?
Yes, from day one.
She was going to walk away from that. This requirement of there being something which is legally new is a very high hurdle, and you mustn't underestimate how difficult that will be. You know, less than 1% of all cases that go to the CCRC end up being referred to the Court of Appeal. It's a very tough hill to climb.
Ros and Steve need to find new evidence for Inside Justice to be able to help. so they'll need to further understand Sarah's plight. Why was Sarah Chesham such a magnet for local gossip? And just what was it that turned everyone against her? Returning to the tiny village of Clavering where Sarah lived, Ros and Steve uncovered rumours of a scandal that may have had catastrophic consequences.
Oh, look, Dancers. Yeah. Well, we are at Dancers Farm, where Thomas Newport lived with his mother.
They're quite wealthy landowners of the area.
Well, they must have employed most of the villagers as farm labourers.
Yeah, definitely.
And also rented the properties.
Essex landowner Thomas Newport employed Sarah's husband and had something of a reputation as a local Lothario. He fathered at least one illegitimate child with one of his servants.
You can imagine him maybe taking advantage of young maidens that came to work for him and that maybe turned his eye.
With contemporary newspapers alleging an illicit intimacy between Sarah and Thomas, Ros and Steve think these rumours may have been the root of the suspicion surrounding Sarah Chesham's character.
In the newspapers, they alluded to the fact that maybe she wasn't, you know, a holier-than-thou lady, and maybe she was a lady of ill repute. Some of them were damning, recording her as a murderess and that wretched woman, and you wonder where they get their information from.
The reporters of the newspapers, they would discuss things with the local community and the local gossips. And that's where they get these reports from, that Sarah was having this intimacy with Thomas.
It's horrendous what they were saying about it.
Ros and Steve have returned to London to share their latest findings with the barristers.
It was through the write-ups in the local and national newspapers, you know, the speculation that there could have been an affair between Thomas and Sarah.
Well, maybe that's why there was so much adverse local gossip against Sarah. I mean, the difficulty is, I suppose, the newspapers were so vitriolic against Sarah. One doesn't know whether they would be reliable in these circumstances. They may have been effectively just smearing.
I think it's on the other where the reporters, I think, could talk to the local community and get the gossip from the local community.
That's exactly the danger, isn't it?
She had trial media, she had the community who was against her, and she couldn't defend herself against Professor Swain Taylor. So she had nowhere to go, nowhere to fight, which it took a few minutes by the jury to convict her guilty.
So tell us what else you've been doing.
Well, I wrote a letter to our MP asking for a royal prerogative of mercy, which was one of our first steps.
Yeah.
Steve and Ros met with Caroline Dinage, their local MP, to find out whether she thought the case was strong enough to be referred to the Ministry of Justice.
I am feeling quite emotional about meeting with Caroline today.
And I think we're hoping that she's on our side and basically batting for Sarah.
Ros, Steve, wow. This has been quite a story, hasn't it?
It has, it has.
I mean, I've been an MP now for 9.5 years, and it's the first time we've ever had anything like this. And my team and I have been really gripped by this story and how it seems that she was prosecuted on the most flimsy of evidence. It also speaks very much of how women were regarded in that time as well.
It's like the old boy network.
Right. But Ros, when you say it was your 4 times cousin, actually that sounds so much more recent, doesn't it?
Seems nearer.
That's one of the things that really hits me is you really do feel an element of huge sympathy for her. It's terrifying to think of what that poor woman must have gone through.
Gaining the support of their MP was key to Ros and Steve's quest to clear Sarah's name.
So we have taken on the case. It's a sovereign pardon that you need, but actually that sounds like you have to get it from the Queen, but actually you have to go through the Ministry of Justice to achieve it. So that's what we've done. We've started off and we've written to the Justice Secretary as our sort of first attempt to try and secure the pardon that you're looking for.
Yeah.
I don't want you to get your hopes up because it's quite rare. I mean, there's only really been a couple in recent history, and Alan Turing being one of them. But, you know, we're going to give it a go because it's such a fascinating story, and I can see how it's kind of gripped the family and sort of stirred up your desire to fight for justice.
It is a social injustice. It's my family member, and so no wonder I take it personally.
Well, we're so grateful that you've given us the opportunity to help you on this, and we
Yes,
really...
we're just hoping that you get something positive from the Secretary of State.
It takes a few weeks, so we're all keeping fingers and toes crossed, and we will come back to you as soon as we have a response, and then we'll get our heads together, whatever the outcome, and plot the way forward. We just wish you the very best of luck with it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I felt quite emotional about it, really, you know.
She said all she can do is assist us in Sarah's plight and basically go forth to the Secretary of Justice and, you know, help him understand where we're coming from. But there's no guarantees.
It will be closure for myself and my family, and the poor lady can rest in peace after over 150 years. Hopefully she's up there now saying, we're nearly there. We're nearly at the end of our journey together.
You're obviously pursuing Sarah's case as determinedly as you can. My feeling is that going via your MP and the Secretary of State for Justice in the hope of getting a royal prerogative of pardon is really the target area and the most realistic.
Oh, that's great.
And the direct route to achieving justice for Sarah. So my feeling is that that is unquestionably the way you need to continue going.
That's
and well done.
That's good to hear, isn't it? We're on the right track. And
Is it now case closed?
Not quite. We've still got a little bit more to do. Wait and see.
All right, well, we wish you both the very best of luck. It's been great seeing you again, and all the very best.
It was great, again, meeting with Sasha and Jeremy, and they still felt the same about the outcome of Sarah's trial. They were really pleased the way we've done things legally.
It's great that Ros and Steve are so enthusiastic about trying to get a pardon for Sarah Chesham. And I think they've got a very balanced approach. They know they want to put all their energy into it, but they understand the limits, and this will keep them going. And I have actually full confidence that they may well get there in the end.
Well, they seem to have identified the straight road to justice from their perspective. So they have a roadmap, which is an excellent thing, and it wouldn't surprise me if they achieve their objective.
Sasha and Jeremy have eloquently said that this was a miscarriage of justice, and that's what we're fighting for.